Hello everyone, welcome back to the Horror Master YouTube channel. And by the title of what I put in the title, we're continuing to the journey through my CD show. This is CD Collection Part 2. So let's get on into it. So last time we left with Boston. So now, the next two albums, if you have a weak stomach, I would recommend you not to watch the couple of albums, maybe 2 to 3 albums, because they're a bit graphic. So first up, we have one of the underrated bands of brutal death metal, and thanks to my buddy Levi, aka Thrashmaniac99, who introduced me to this band. Broken Hope, Swapped in Gore, one of the pioneer albums in brutal death metal. If you have not yet listened to these guys, give them a listen. If not, go watch the Broken Hope documentary. I seriously recommend it. You have no idea how much I recommend it. Next up, again, if you have a weak stomach, don't look at the album cover because it's kind of graphic. Brujeria Matando Güeros. Yeah, I told you it was going to get a bit graphic. As a person who lives in a border town next to Mexico, most of the stuff that Brujeria sings, you kind of see it every day. Songs like 666, Matando Güeros, Narcos Satánicos, Chinga de Mecos. It's a very, very heavy grindcore album and one of the best in the Mexican scene. And again, that album cover, one of the most controversial album covers there is. Next up, again, you have a weak stomach, don't look at it. And it's from Cannibal Corpse. Of course, I'm representing right here. I don't have a lot of Cannibal Corpse in my show, but I'll get to it eventually. But I just have one album, and it's probably one of the best. Tomb of the Humiliated. I mean, Hammer Smash Space, Necropedophilia, Split Wide Open, I Come Blood. How much brutal can you get than that? And that album cover, two corpses doing a very kind of act, if you think about it. Next up, Carcass, Torn Arteries. The latest in the Carcass discography. And I'm going to say right now, it's not as good as Surgical Steel was in 2013, but it's still a pretty phenomenal album. From the title, from the songs like Torn Arteries, Under the Scaffold Blade, Decides Mermoso Swing, In God We Trust. And I also like the fact that it had this big comedical side to Carcass, because if you look carefully, the heart is kind of made of ghost peppers and all that, which, it kind of adds to the comic side of Carcass, which is still brutality at its finest. Next up, Clouds with Durre. This is a melodic death doom band from the UK, and they add a lot of cellos, violins, pianos to their music, which creates this sad atmospheric to them, and it's a very beautiful album that it even made me cry. I mean, even, everything from the songs to even the album cover kind of makes you a bit sad if you don't know if it's a heart or an apple. Kind of looks like an apple, then again, kind of looks like a heart at times. So it's up to the listener's imagination what to think of it. But give these guys a listen. Next up, Cradle of Filth, Cruelty and the Beast. My favorite album of Cradle of Filth, and I was fortunately enough to see a Cradle of Filth live back in 2019. I think I was around there with Wednesday 13 and Raven Black. And I was front row when I was watching Cradle of Filth, and I actually got to meet some of the band members from Cradle of Filth. I didn't got to meet Danny Phils nor the bassist, but I got to meet everyone from Lindsay to Matt. Pretty good people. But this album, it's about Elizabeth Bathory, the infamous Elizabeth Bathory in her reign of terror. I mean, to me, Bathory Oriah, my favorite Cradle of Filth song of all time. What more can you say about it? Next up, we have some Creed. Yeah, Creed get a lot of shit lately, but you know what? It's my CD collection. I can have whatever the hell I want. But, My Own Prison, at the time, it was not a monstrous album, but it was an album that was really talked about because supposedly they were quote-unquote Christian metal, even though they weren't, but somehow they were. It gets confusing, but songs like My Own Prison, America, Illusion, What's This Life For, instantly rock alternative rock hits. But give these guys a listen if you haven't listened to it. I mean, I like alternative Alter Bridge better than Creed because it's some of the members from Creed went to Alter Bridge. So I'm just saying about that. Next up, we have it could have been an oddity in my collection. Is kind of more of a soundtrack, which is the Crow soundtrack. Um, I love The Crow so much. I love the movie. I even have the graphic novel here in my possession, which, if you have not yet watched or listened or even read the graphic novel, I seriously recommend you to read it. It's a journey of sadness, beauty, tragedy. I seriously recommend you to read it if you have the chance to. But in terms of the soundtrack, it fits for the time being. This was in the late 90s. Of course, you had bands like The Cure, Helmet, Pantera, Rolling Bands, Violet Feminists, Rage Against the Machine, Nine Inch Nails. Great, bands at the time that gave the movie a bit of a soundtrack that fits at the timing. And my God, it's a great soundtrack. Brandon Lee, God rest your soul. Next up, next couple of albums, we have some Darkthrone albums. Of course, we have Blaze in the Northern Sky, the legendary Blaze in the Northern Sky. Of course, the second album from Darkthrone after their debut album, which was a bit more about death slash thrash metal album. They went more this one to their now black metal origins. Of course, Catacandrin Life Code, In the Shadow of Our Horns, probably my favorite Darkthrone tune. The Pagan Winter, you name it, it's fucking Darkthrone at its finest. Next up, after that, we have Transylvania Hunger, which kind of was the catalyst for what would later become suicidal, depressive black metal, which gave inspiration bands like Shining, Disaster, and Ghostbath, and amongst others. This album was completely sang in their Norwegian tongue, which a lot of people like myself don't know Norwegian for shit. But it adds to that mysticism and that mystique of the album, if I can say so myself. But it's a great album to listen to, especially in cold winters. And like I say, if you feel more of the depressed, suicidal thing, this is probably the album that kind of is to blame and to thank for that, if you think about it. We get later into the more recent years. This was a gift from my buddy Levi for, I think it was for a Christmas gift he gave it to me. Old Star, again, Darkthrone was still in Darkthrone. Talk about riff galore, paying homage to bands like AC/DC, the No Album side, a bit of punk, but more to the black metal roots again. I mean, to me, the hardship of the Scots, that riff, it's identical to Let Me Put My Love Into You by AC/DC, and it's probably one of my favorite tracks of the album. But overall, the album is great. Like I said, paying homage to those classic bands, new album bands, by fusing their thing for black metal, creating something different, which says a lot from their early punk stuff, which I've gone on record I don't like. I've tried my best to give them a listen, it just doesn't click on me. And it wasn't enough. They followed up with this year, with of course the infamous Eternal Hall. Same thing I mentioned with Old Star, but a bit more black metal into it. And again, nothing against Darkthrone in this later stages of the career. I think it's the later albums they've released have been one of the best albums they've released in a long time. Again, the punk era wasn't my favorite, but it's still a great album to listen to, especially I guess around this time, or we just want to jam out with friends. Next up, a one-man Death Doom project from the country of Jordan. Yes, there is a country named Jordan. I actually was shocked there's actually a country named Jordan. This is called The Dead Sea, but the album Hypernatremia. It's a sad, beautiful, melodic Death Doom project, and it gets to show that those countries like Jordan, those odd countries, can create some of the most unique yet odd music, which is probably the best thing about metal. Songs like Modified Beauty, the title track, Weave the Waves, Limbless Bride. I mean, songs that will touch to the heart of the core. So if you have not listened to The Dead Sea, give them a listen. Next up, we have some Death. Yes, the band Death. Of course, the infamous scream, bloody gore. One of, if not the greatest death metal album of all time. When you have songs like Zombie Ritual, Baptized in Blood, Torn to Pieces, the title track, Evil Dead. When you have a song like Evil Dead, it's an instant classic, no matter what. Fucking amazing. If you have not listened to Death or Scream Bloody Gore, then what the hell are you doing here? Go listen to it now. And of course, following that, we have the second album, Leprosy. By this time, Death was getting more into moving away from the more brutal side of death metal. They weren't really brutal, but more a bit technical and at times progressive, which will later show in later albums like Human, Symbolic, or The Sound of Perseverance. But this, I mean, it's again another amazing Death album. Death is one of those bands that don't have bad albums. All of their discography is like amazing to godly. The title track, Pull the Plug, Left to Die, Choke on It, fucking amazing. Godspeed, Chuck. God fucking speed. Next up, since I'm the Death Doom guy, I'm in the Horseman podcast, of course. Me being the Death Doom guy, I like to get a lot of Death Doom in my shows, and sometimes I come up with rare oddities, like this one I'm gonna talk about. This is the band Decompose with their album Hope Finally Died. This album was released about around the same time bands like Anathema, My Dying Bride, Can Antonia, My Paradise Lost were releasing their big known albums. And of course, when big bands release those albums, there's some albums or bands that kind of get left behind, not talked about, and will later become hidden gems of the genre. And this one became a hidden gem to the point that if you find a decent copy at a good price, snatch it, because it's kind of hard to find one in decent shape. And it's an amazing Death Doom album that a lot of people don't know and should get more recognition about it. So if you're not heard of the band Decompose or this album, give them a listen. Next up, Def Leppard, Pyromania. I do love my classic rock from time to time, and it's fucking Pyromania. I mean, Photograph, Foolin', Rock of Ages, Baby's Got a Gun. When we're getting one from this English band, of course, new album at first, and later would inspire glam metal bands, of course, alongside Van Halen to inspire glam metal like Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, so on and so forth. Next up, another Death Doom hidden gem. This time all the way from Lisbon, Portugal. I've talked about Lisbon, Portugal, that they kind of have, well, Portugal in general, that they kind of have this Death Doom gothic sound to their bands, which I really, really enjoy. And the album that I have in my possession the band is called Desires, with the album Infinity, A Timeless Journey Through Emotional Dream. This is a 2019 reissue, if I remember correctly, and it comes with the alternative album cover and, of course, the original album cover. And talk about dark melody, melancholy, kind of representing a bit of how Portugal was at the time, during the time of Desires, because they've been around since late 80s, early 90s, around there, and not a lot of people know about Desires. So if you have not yet listened to Desires and like Death Doom, give them a listen, and if you find a decent copy, get it, because it's kind of hard to find one. Of course, some Dio, Holy Diver. Very controversial at the time when it was released, of course, with the album cover of the mascot Murray kind of tying up a priest with chains, which I see nothing wrong with it, but at the time it was a really big deal because of the PMRC and Tipper Gore, which we all know that story, but it's fucking Ronald James Dio. Holy Diver, Gypsy, Invincible, Doing Doctor Strangers, Rainbow in the Dark. What more can you want? And just when you thought Dio couldn't get any better, he followed it up with, of course, The Last in Line, which again, Dio, it's the man, the myth, the legend himself, Dio. Songs like We Rock, Evil Eyes, Mystery, the title track. Oh my fucking god, that riff and Dio screams just fucking hell running James Dio. Next up, in my opinion, the best Death Doom album of all time. And this is from a band that they only released one album and they call it a career. This band is from Australia, Disembowelment, with their album Transcends the Peripheral. If you want to talk about quintessential Death Doom, this album has everything over from Death Doom. Slow, dark, evil, melancholy, beautiful, sad, depressing. Everything you want from Death Doom, this album represents it. So like I said before, in my mind, the greatest Death Doom album of all time. And they're extremely, and I mean extremely hidden hard gem to find, especially if you find it at a decent price. Next up we got some Dissection, Storm of the Light's Bane. This is the Argentinian copy because you can tell because it doesn't have the logo nor Storm of the Light's Bane, but I mean, for it to be a pioneer of a later melodic, black, and even sometimes even death metal at the time in Sweden, I mean, of course, it's Dissection, one of the biggest bands out there. I mean, songs like Unhollow, No Dreams, the title track itself, but to me, Where Dead Angels Lie, that riff in the middle of the dun 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 dun, fucking mastery. Next up, The Doors. I've talked about that I say I like my classic rock from time to time, and The Doors is one of those bands that you can't really hate because they're fucking amazing. Break Through the Other Side, Light My Fire, the infamous Light My Fire, but to me, The End. This is The End. One of the best long songs ever to be released in the 70s, early 60s, late 70s. I mean, revolutionary at the time, and of course Jim Morrison being, Jim Morrison. You know how that went. Next up, we got the Eagles with Hotel California. Another classic rock album, of course, the infamous story of how supposedly the band recorded this album worshipping Satan, if you believe the stories around there. But besides that, if you go deep into the album, you got some really good tracks from Live in the Fast Lane when they're doing a lot of zombie dust, from Victim of Love to Try and Love Me Again. If you like classic rock myself and like the Eagles, this is the one Eagles album that a lot of people will go into. Next up, in a lot of people's minds, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, black metal album of all time, and for good reasons. Emperor in the Night Side Eclipse. Talk about symphonic yet dark, atmospheric black metal, and from 1994, around there, 1994, that this album was released. But of course, you have Ishan, Samus, Torrot, Faust before Faust did what they did in the Norwegian scene. And of course, we have songs like Into the Infinity of Thoughts, Beyond the Great Vast Forever. But to me, Ino a Satana, especially if you ever seen Emperor live. I've never seen Emperor live, but I've heard that seeing Emperor live and singing that song is like next to probably something like O Father, Satan, O Son, that kind of level. But if you have not yet listened to Emperor, this is the album for you to get into Emperor. Enchantment, Dance the Naked Marble, another hidden gem from Death Doom, and this was released around the same time that Anathema, My Dying Bride, Canatonia, and Paradise Lost were releasing their big albums. And another one of those albums that kind of got overlooked because, again, they were focusing more on those bands. And this album got a bit of a cult following later on in the years. Of course, this was the reissue edition of the album, which was released by Peaceville Records in 2015. And they only released one album, and they've been on a hiatus for almost 30, close to 40 years, and they're finally gonna release their second album later in 2022, which I'm really, really excited for that. Of course, Entomb, Left Hand Path, Left Hand Path. If I can speak English, Left Hand Path. What more can you say about this album that hasn't been said already? LG Petrov, God rest your soul, and thank you for giving us this phenomenal, phenomenal album. We got next Europe with The Final Countdown. Of course, overplayed to the core. Europe is one of those bands that unfortunately has gone down in popularity. Their albums haven't been that great, but in the 80s, they were one of the biggest bands in the world. I mean, to have a song like The Final Countdown being overplayed in almost a lot of commercials, movies, TVs, you name it. But if you go more into it, I mean, Rock the Night, Time Has Come, On the Loose, the song Carrie, the infamous ballad Carries, one of the best ballads ever in the 80s. Amazing album. Next up, we got Evade with The Pale Light of Fireflies. If Swallow the Sun were to have a sister, Evade would be that sister, because at first when I was listening to this album, it kind of gave me a Swallow the Sun vibe. The more I got into the album, I was like, this is definitely a clone of Swallow the Sun, but in a good way. And it actually made me go back and listen to the entire discography. And yeah, it is like Swallow the Sun. Like I said, if Swallow the Sun were to have a twin or a sister, Evade would be that. Which, if you have not listened to Evade, give them a listen. You'll definitely love them, especially if you're a big Swallow the Sun fan like myself. You'll instantly connect with them. Next up, we have a bit of an oddity in terms of post metal, funeral, death doom, whatever you want to call it. Eyeless and Geisa with the album Act 1, The Protagonist. A bit of an oddity because it's not your usual album with the same structures. It kind of has that, of course, has a lot of doom, a lot of death doom, funeral doom, even post experimental metal. And for some reason, it makes it work because it will take you on a full journey that you're not expecting it to go. And I highly recommend you to listen to this album if you have the chance. Just go to their Bandcamp. It's right there on Bandcamp. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Of course, the infamous Fleetwood Mac album. I mean, overplayed, oversaturated, yes, but still, there's a reason why this album is up there with albums like Back in Black and Michael Jackson's Thriller as one of the best-selling albums of all time. Of course, you have songs like Dreams, Never Going Back Again, Don't Stop, The Chain, Songbird. I mean, songs like that have been played to death in rock radio, but it still packs a punch. And that album cover by Kuro Mick Fleetwood, I mean, the Dangling Balls. Nice touch there. Next up, we have, if you like bands like Agalog and Panopticon and Pilgrim, then you like this one. This is called Hierophant Violin by the band Forlisten, which was released in Hypnotic Dirt Records, which is a record label that I highly recommend you all to check out. Like I said, if you like Agalog, Panopticon, Pilgrim, you'll like this band. It's only 2 songs, which they're both like almost close to 15 minutes in length, which it's a lot to undertake, but once you get into it, amazing album. Next up, we have with Freyo with 1692. Just by the name 1692, you kind of think this is kind of a tribute or talk about the Salem witch trials, which, yes and no. It talks about a bit about the Salem witch trials, but also talks about the main vocalist of struggles in growing up in a really strict religious family and how her family wouldn't allow her to be who she wanted to be. So she kind of took all those emotions and created this album mixed with the 1692 Salem witch trials, which created a sludgy doom album which grabs a punch. It'll punch you right in the nuts. Of course, we have Ghost, probably my favorite Ghost album, Meliora. Of course, I love Interference. I love Opus Hippopotamus, and of course, I love shit, I'm forgetting the name. Prequel. Prequel. I love Prequel, even though some of the people at the Horseman podcast don't like Prequel. I did enjoy Prequel, and I'm really excited for the new upcoming album later coming out in March. So I'll be giving that a listen. But to me, Meliora is the album to Ghost. I mean, Spirit, Pinnacle to the Pit, Series, He Is, Mommy Does, Dios in Absentia. To me, that's the epitome of Ghost. Next up, Ghost Bath with Self Loader. This is a depressive, suicidal black metal band from North Dakota, which is kind of odd. We usually don't get bands from the Dakotas. But this, I was introduced to the Ghost Bath, well, actually the album specifically to from Nick from Trozo Metal. He actually talked about it in one of his CD collections, and I, for some reason, the album cover just got my attention, and I listened to it, and I loved it from last year, and I still listen to it to once in a while because it's a great, phenomenal, depressive suicide black metal album. Next up, we have Green Day with American Idiot. Who anyone who grew up in the 2000s and didn't listen to Green Day and they tell you they didn't listen to Green Day, they're fucking lying. Everybody in the 2000s in middle school and high school listened to this album religiously. I mean, for good reasons. I mean, American Idiot, Jesus Siberia, Holiday, Boulevard Broken Dreams, Saint Jimmy, Wake Up When September Ends, Homecoming, She's a Rebel. There's a reason why this is probably next to an album like Dookie as their best album to date. Next up, we got some Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. One of the best debut albums ever in metal in 1980. It was released in 1987. Of course, Welcome to the Jungle, Mr. Brownstone, Paradise City, Sweet Child of Mine, Rocket Queen. Of course, we have Axl Rose, one of the best frontmen at the time in rock. You have Slash, Duff McKagan, Easy Stradlin, Steven Adler on drums. You name it. Probably one of the best bands out of the post quote unquote glam metal, even though they were kind of glam metal but more into the more hard rock side. But you get the point. I'll just put that right here. Next up, we have Hill Ripper, The Affairs of the Poisons. Shout out to James McBain from Hill Ripper, which we did an interview. We interviewed on the Horseman podcast. If you have not watched that video, I seriously recommend you to watch it. But if you like bands like Venom, Destroyer 666, you'll definitely love Hill Ripper. I mean, fast, black metal, speed, thrashy. You'll seriously enjoy this album a lot, especially that album cover. I mean, look, it's kind of like a Salem Witch Trial-esque trial to and to have the fucking goat, another goat, just to add more insurers to injury. Another fucking goat. Just put this right here. And last but not least, I got to end the video, I have 3 more CDs, and they're all from the band Him. If y'all know, Him is one of my favorite bands of all time, and they mean a lot to me. Of course, we have the debut album, Greatest Love Songs, Volume 666, which to me, it is their best album to date. Songs like For You, Your Sweet 666, The Heartless, the cover of Don't Fear the Reaper. It's a great song. But to me, When Love Ends Embrace, probably one of my favorite Him songs. Probably my favorite Him song of all time because it means the world to me. Like, you have no idea. And then, of course, the follow-up, it is Wrestleblade Romance, the Pink album, like a lot of people like to say. And this was the album that broke them into into the stardom. Of course, the infamous Join Me in Death, Dead is in Love with Us, Heaven Tonight, One Last Time, Poison Girl, Gone with the Sin, which is one of my personal favorites for obvious reasons. phenomenal album to listen to, especially like I said, if you like more the gothic side. And this was the introduction, the first appearance of the heartagram, which will later become their symbol. And of course, last but certainly not least, I have the third follow-up and the last CD we're going to talk about in this video. Deep Shadows and Brilliant Highlights. The oddest hymn album in the entire discography, if I do say so myself, because of the time they were going through different record labels, different producers. You know, each producer has their different sound to the album. So it was kind of a mixed bag, but the end result, to me, was a pretty good album. Not an album that a lot of people talk about in terms of him, but an album that should be talked about more. We have songs like Love You Like I Do, Lose You Tonight, Close to the Flame, Salt in Your Wounds, Enjoying Sorrow, which it is one of the most beautiful songs that they ever created, and a song that means the world to me. So that does it for part 2 of my CD shelf collection. I hope you guys enjoy. Stay tuned for part 3. I don't know when I'm gonna record this, probably after this. It depends on timing and all that, but don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all things, and follow me on my Instagram at rkaramanmerogad. I know I'm gonna have it somewhere probably down below, or it's gonna be tagged on my YouTube page. But until then, stay metal.